Sure.
I don't put you on the spot, but
That's okay. I mean, I guess we'll just say the Our Father then. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Father, bless.
O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, bless the refreshments and the fellowship of these thy servants. For holy art thou always, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. There are cookies on the table.
thank you.
Oh, I think that's funny.
I was wondering why you're sitting over here.
I was like, oh, they took it to the meal classic, eh? No. Good thing we actually had cookies.
It was even more washed out on here than it was on the screen, so.
Is this okay there?
Yeah, it looks like it looks pretty visible now. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Darren.
We okay to get started?
You're absolutely okay.
I'll do this real quick. There. Now they know who Barbie and Dog Boss is. Sorry.
Is that
We
the
like
good side?
Is that the what?
The good side?
Every side's a good side, right? Isn't that how that works? So today we're just going to talk about the goals of this presentation are to express the importance of pre-need arrangements, options between cremations and burials. I know you guys will be focused more on the burial aspect. The difference between pre-planning versus pre-funding, there are two different options there. There's misconceptions about government assistance, VA assistance, and Medicaid spend downs, and then questions. Okay, so that's going to be our rough basic goals for tonight. So the need for pre-need. Everything in our event requires planning, right? Big events, babies, baby showers, weddings, graduations, funerals also need planning. Okay, so pre-planning gets you guys the services and the memorialization that you want without your family having to struggle and think, what would have they wanted? Your family's going to have so many other things to take care of at that time, whether it's estates, whether it's helping so if your spouse passes away, your kids are going to help you try to cope with things, right? So there's so many steps and things that take place. If you can take care of the planning portion and get what you want down, that alleviates so many things for your loved ones, with or without the funding part of it. And then again, it's personalization. I think for you guys, it's really important because of your religion, right? So your beliefs said what you guys like to have traditionally, from my understanding, traditionally we like things done within 3 days, right? So funerals used to take 3 days. You passed, you met with the funeral director, and usually the next day you had a viewing or a service, right? Today it seems like people pass, they meet the director the next day, they get the casket in, and they do services 3 or 4 days later. So by having everything planned, when we as funeral homes get that call, we can look at your phone, okay, we know we have 3 days to get this done, and this is what their basic plan is, and then it helps us get things going so your family and I can honor, or funeral home, can honor what you guys want to have done. So questions you might ask. My will already has what I want done. Why do I meet with a funeral home? Your wills and safety deposit boxes, they don't get open or read until weeks after you pass. Okay, so there is no way for us to wait to do a service until the will is done. Usually, in order for a will to be read, the attorney needs to see a death certificate. Death certificates take about 2 weeks to come in, right? So all of that kind of stuff, it's great to have it, but safety deposit boxes, your family's not going to be able to get into them in time. So having this written down with a funeral home, or having it written down on the packets that we gave you in a lockbox in your home, right? A fire safe, somewhere where all your important documents are at home so your family can get them. That's where it's going to be important.
So you're saying a will is an incorrect place to do funeral service planning.
Exactly.
Like it's not something one ought to put in a will.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Your family knows what you want, so why do I need to know what you want? Are they going to follow your wishes? Are they going to do what you want them to do? By us knowing, we are able to enforce, for lack of a better term, and honor what you guys want and follow through with that. If you make arrangements with us, can your family or next of kin legally change those arrangements? Yes, they can. So even if you go to a funeral home and you say, I want to be buried and I want a viewing and I want this, this, and this, and your kids come in and they're like, we know Dad gave you $10,000, we want them cremated and we're just going to scatter them out back. They can do that unless you have a contrary of intent form signed with a funeral home. A contrary of intent form that you get during your pre-arrangement conferences states you want that funeral home to act on your behalf and follow your wishes exactly the way you want it. And then no one but you can come in and change that. Okay? If your funeral home closes or sells or we move away or you just don't care for us anymore because I rubbed you the wrong way, do you lose everything? And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. And I apologize, this is what's cut off on the bottom. No, all of your pre-arrangements, even the contrary of intent forms, are all transferable to any funeral home that takes care of you. The funds that we place it in, those get transferred to any funeral home that takes care of you. That funeral home does not need to honor our contract pricing, okay? But the money does get paid to the funeral home that takes care of you, right? And so with various funeral homes, they offer various plans for prepaying, some of which, like ours, gain interest. We apply that interest to the increased costs of certain things such as flowers, clergy members, opening and closing of graves, things that we can't control the cost of, okay? And knock on wood, so far, it's always been enough to cover whatever increases happen.
And you get a refund back.
And when, yes, with us, if there's funds left over, because the interest is higher than what we need, we actually give that money back to the family. Okay? Not all funeral homes do that. By state law, we are not contracted and mandated to do that. That's just something we do. Hello!
There's one paying the bill. We sent the last one in.
So I'll just give it a couple minutes here. So this doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't apply, it does. But in general, a lot of questions we have is we want to be cremated because it's cheaper, flat out. The truth of it is a cremation, now these are prices based on our 2022, 23 pricing. A direct cremation, which includes a temporary urn with us, and the county authorization fee is $34.75. We can do a direct burial, which legitimately means you pass away, we pick you up, you are not embalmed, you are not viewed, you have 0 services, we put you in a cloth-covered casket, and we bury you. And we can do that for $4,030. Okay, so there's not a huge difference when you look at it that way. Average cost of services right now for a cremation or a burial with all services, right? So we're talking a 20 gauge non-sealing casket, which is one of our lower end caskets, still a beautiful casket. A basic vault, honorariums, 10 death certificates, flowers, most opening and closing. Now, I did this based on the opening and closing around Center Hall, which is around $850, $900. Okay?
You're talking about grave site.
Right, to open the grave, open and close the grave. I can tell you Boalsburg is $1,100 or $1,200. Center County Memorial Park is almost $2,000, right? So this is based more on a $900 opening and closing.
Your little, excuse me, your little country cemeteries are more reasonable. So the cemeteries in Center Hall is $875. If you come up to State College, Gray's Cemetery, that's only $900. So they're all averaging about that. But if you get into Boalsburg, that's a little more upscale cemetery. Center County Memorial Park is out of this world. So
And that's, so the average service, basically, with a viewing, a 2-hour viewing, funeral service the next day, the average right now is about 10-6.
And would it be more if you didn't have it at the funeral home but had it at a church? Like, is
So-
there cost to move the?
That is our fees, whether we do it at the funeral home or whether we do it within a local, any local facility, right? So whether we come here and we do it like we did Greg Henny's and we had the services here at the church, it costs the same whether we do it here or whether we do it there. Where Greg's costs a little more is he went to the Orthodox cemetery way out of town, right? In Clymer.
It was like 2.5 hours, I think.
Yeah, so
That was
there's,
quite the drive.
right.
Yeah.
So there's mileage when you get
It was.
when you get that far out of town, then there's mileage on that. So these all include any removals, whether it's at a house, hospital, nursing home, anything within the county or 25 miles, right? Once we get beyond that, unless you're at the VA home in Altoona, we don't charge extra mileage to go to a VA home in Altoona. You would have mileage on top of that, right? But for actual location of services, we don't charge whether it's our location or on site somewhere. Okay, like I said, unless it's further away.
So,
We are, go ahead.
so do you have to be involved? Like, say you want to have the services in the church, and you want to have a 24-hour service and the next day buried. Can you have that option?
So, and Father and I were actually discussing this before. Legally, because there is a public viewing, because there's people outside of your immediate family being present, legally, you have to be embalmed in Pennsylvania. Now, the Amish even embalm now. Okay, they never embalmed before. The Amish do embalm now because they're laid out in their home, but they have public.
So they did that in compliance with Pennsylvania law then?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, yeah. And so I talked to Kathleen, she's the funeral director attorney for the state. And I asked her this, I was like, listen, because it's their religious preference to not be embalmed, how does that work? For instance, if you are Orthodox Jewish, you are not embalmed. You are also not viewed. That's the difference, right? They have no viewing for an Orthodox Jewish. They are buried within 3 days. So
if you
that's
have
how they get
closed
away.
casket,
If
and
you
you're
have a
not
closed,
closing,
if you have a closed, sealed casket at the funeral home, we do not need to embalm. Do we need to if it's a sealed, closed,
No,
out of?
if it's a sealed casket, and a sealed casket, if you don't know what I mean, if you don't understand what I mean by a sealed casket, that would be a metal casket. Wood caskets do not seal. So a metal casket is a casket made of metal, has a rubber gasketed seal around it. We close it and we crank it down tight, and that seals it. You do not need to be embalmed, but we cannot open that up once it's closed and sealed due to health issues, due to everything, the body's, after a couple of days, it's going to start to break down. So you're in a sealed container, it would hold the odors down. I hate to say it like that, but that's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you do not need to be embalmed. You do need to be in a casket, okay? And then to be buried in this area, unless we get a green burial cemetery, so far there's none around here real close, you have to be in a vault. That's a cemetery requirement of a vault. Does everybody know what a vault is? It's a concrete box that your casket goes inside, and then the lid goes on top of it, and typically it seals also.
And everybody has to have that.
That's a
It's a
cemetery.
cemetery requirement, it's not a state
Okay.
requirement. There is a cemetery up in Pine Glen on the other side of Snowshoe. It's about 45 minutes away. But anyways, you don't have to be in a vault. They just now started that you had to be in a casket. It's due to water supply. They're finding that if you're not in a casket, your body liquids float out into the water supply, so they have to be careful of that. But, so that's what vaults are for.
The vault though, I mean, typically like that for the cemetery, you're looking at you want to be able to mow an
Right.
even surface. I mean, fundamentally, like it's
So
a matter of
Fundamentally,
they wanna,
the purpose of a vault is to prevent the ground from shifting under the weight
Yeah.
and to prevent divots.
Yeah,
That is the
like,
fundamental.
yeah.
As the casket breaks down,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
not consistent sinking. That's the fundamental purpose
Mhm.
of a vault.
But at present, guys, in this area, apparently we need to have a vault.
I think
K-food
Friends,
containers, what they're called.
yeah, Cape Fruit Container. Friends Cemetery, which is out Pine Grove Mills area, Stormstown, Pine Grove. And I'm sorry, I'm learning that area, but it's out that direction. They do not require a vault. They do require a casket. Now, if you want a green burial, which is no embalming, no casket, no vault, you get wrapped in a linen shroud and placed in a bamboo or wicker basket and tray. The closest cemetery that does that is Pax Tang Cemetery, which is outside of Harrisburg. Okay, very, very expensive to do it there. I mean, it's very expensive.
St. Eunice is.
So question about the green, or about the, so I mean, I thought you'd said just a moment ago that Pennsylvania requires a casket. Now, so they don't require a casket for burial, but they do require a casket for.
You have
any
to have
kind
a casket for a burial. That's a cemetery requirement. That's not a
Oh, so casket is not that is a cemetery-based,
cemetery.
which is why you can have a green burial in what you're describing. Okay,
Yeah,
very
and
good.
they just have to have certain licensing.
And
they're
I'm
told
going
that
to
it's a green
assume,
burial.
but please correct me if I'm wrong, every cemetery in this area requires a casket, right? Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
And also
Whether you're
requires a
involved or
vault.
not.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yep, got that, yep. What did you say?
Whether you're embalmed or not.
Correct.
Correct.
Am I picking up from the conversation your beliefs that you don't like to be embalmed?
Not particularly.
Okay,
no.
so you don't have to be.
They do a 24-hour viewing.
Is the casket open for that 24-hour viewing?
Yes.
Does it
Yeah,
take-
so
Yes.
unfortunately, our like, yeah, definitionally, traditionally, we would like to have the body, you know, cleaned, prepared, laid out even in the casket, but to be viewed and prayed over and with for 2-3 days, and then open casket funeral at the church, followed by immediate burial. Yeah. So I mean, it is the, and so the preference of we don't have a dogma or something like, we don't have a against embalming. And I think actually I would say that for a lot of people, there's a lot of situations where embalming might make sense. For instance, you know, like if you know, you have 4 children and one's in Canada and one's in California and whatnot. I mean, that might make sense for and obviously if you need to travel over state lines, that's another.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, to
Like,
travel
it's a
state lines, you
U-
have to be embalmed or cremated.
Yeah, that's a U.S. level, federal level. I was aware of that. But I mean, it might make sense. But I mean, obviously, you know, as you said, Pennsylvania law is what it is, and we can't change that. At least right now. At least right now.
At least for the momentary. Now, could the Orthodox of America, right? Orthodox Church in America. Could you, as a religious group, go and try to get this passed and changed? Yes. I'm going to tell you, the Amish have a lot of pull with what they do, right? So if they are caving to this embalming regulation, it would be very difficult to be able to express the purpose of the open casket and the viewing and the prayers without the embalming. And it boils down to CDC, sanitation, biohazard. That's what it boils down to. I mean, that's what the legal defense is going to boil down to.
You know, you have someone that's, and I don't mean it's gross by any means, but if you have someone that's laying out in the church and even in the casket, and we prepare them, and after a day or two, they can really start to smell. And if they're not embalmed, their bowels will move, their bladders will give way, and then they can purge, basically throw up. And if we don't have that all, you know, embalmed and treated, it can be a mess. It really would be very messy. So
So for the Orthodox Jewish, Do they have a closed casket?
Yes. No one sees
No, is
them.
that their preference, or is that just their bow to, like, this is how it
No,
is
that's their
here?
preference.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know,
they're not, so you're not allowed, we're not allowed to do it in the synagogue, right? You're not allowed to take a body into the synagogue.
Oh,
Right,
interesting.
so
Okay.
you
Yeah,
stop,
yeah.
like, you're supposed to stop 7 times for 7 prayers, or 3 times for
Oh my
7 prayers.
goodness.
Like, right, there's a whole realm of things. The few Jewish ones that we have taken care of, they come to me, I bathe them. Now, they're, I want to say it's Shiva, but I could be wrong on that term, is a group that come in and they can bathe and wash and prepare. We don't have one locally for Center Hall that comes and does that. So we bathe them, we dress them in their shroud. That is all that they get dressed in. They get laid in their burial shrouds, and then it's their casket is, everything is wooden.
they use
There is
wooden
no
pegs,
metal,
there's no
everything's
handle,
pegs.
wooden handles, it's all.
Yeah. So for
So
those,
exactly how, we're supposed to.
Right, well,
Right.
except for, I mean, obviously there's some major
Yeah,
differences there, like the fact that we're bringing them into the church for one
Right,
thing.
right, that's.
But there's a
But other than that.
sort of a resurrectional flip there too.
Yeah, now with the touching the casket, the deceased and kissing the deceased, right? How does that square with what this says?
Well, I mean, I think, no, they're absolutely right that corpses begin to decay and, as they say, expel things in various ways. Traditionally, and I can say this from my experience in Alaska, there's a sort of like, well, we know how to prepare certain things. I mean, like, I think they tend to like angle the body in certain ways, this kind of thing. I mean, you guys maybe
Right.
can, but also, I mean, I think that there's just generally a greater level of comfort with, like, okay, this is a corpse and this is what a corpse looks like. Like this person is dead, and so his face is disfigured. I mean, it's, and I think, generally speaking, 21st century Americans, we don't have, and I mean, and obviously I will say too, there's certainly, Matishka, not so much myself, but Matishka absorbed, experienced some pretty gross, like people who died in the river, kind of scenario, and it was open casket, in that context, but yuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They
It made me
bloat.
think,
Yeah.
And if they drown, they bloat up,
Yeah.
and the body will start to turn purple.
Yep.
And start to get dark within 24 hours.
Yeah, definitely saw the purple. I mean, again, I lived in rural Alaska. There's no such thing as a funeral director in Western Alaska.
right.
Of course, there's a lot of things that there's no such thing. Like, for instance, a paved road.
Right.
So, okay, yeah, very good, very good.
I think that's the biggest thing is in this society, right?
Right.
Where people, we see it all the time, people do viewings on our side of things because they want to not see their loved one in that distressed state. They want to see them in a healthier appearing state. So when you don't embalm them and they lose their coloring just within hours, right? They lose their coloring, or their face doesn't hold a certain shape, or their skin looks different, or any of those kinds of things. You risk a family member or someone coming in and going, that's traumatic, and then they come back and sue the funeral home and the state board because we allowed them to experience something so traumatic. And so that may be part of why they
Yeah,
to
it's
alleviate
interesting.
some of that
I will
stuff.
say, I mean, like, having seen, again, in that Alaskan context,
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, sometimes we would do a funeral and it'd be like, well, I knew that man when he was alive. It doesn't even look like him anymore. I mean, just the way that the face can be disfigured and whatnot. And you guys obviously know that very well. So, okay. No, thank you for, thank you for.
Pre-planning versus pre-funding is just that. Okay, pre-planning is just that, it's a plan. It is getting down what you guys want. It's meeting with a funeral home and getting your vital information down that we are required to have for death certificates, information if we wanted to do an obituary. So things for death certificates that a lot of times, not so much spouses will know this, your children really struggle, is what was your mother's maiden name? That's the number one thing that stumps everybody. Or your social security number. And kids today don't think, well, just pull mom and dad's last year's taxes. It's on the tax forms, right? They don't think like that. So getting things down such as who your parents were, maiden names, birth dates, did you graduate high school or college, what's your highest level of education, those are things that are required on a death certificate that sometimes our families find that they really struggle with. So out of everything tonight, planning is the most important thing. Whether you fund it or not is here nor there. I hate to say it that way, but it is. Planning is the biggest thing. In your books, in your folders, right? So there's 3 things. 2 of them are actually from the Orthodox and American Church. The gold ribbon is forms that you would fill out. They're like advanced directives, and they say, based on my Christian belief, this is what I want done, this is what I can't have done, this is how we want to be prepared, this is allow me to be on this life support or not this life support, right? Who's going to be in charge of that kind of stuff? So that's something, living wills and directives, that is really good for you guys to have anywhere. So if something happens to you and you go to the hospital, your spouse or your kids or anyone can grab that and say, here's what they want, right? We can't give them this blood transfusion for whatever reason. Here's why, right? The blue ribbon one is focused more on funeral and burial information. So it mimics a lot of what's in our pamphlet that we put in there, and it says my life, my wishes. The difference is my life, my wishes is very generic for across the board. This blue ribbon, another gift for my loved ones, this is more very specific to the Orthodox faith. Okay, so there are places in there for you to put who's your executor, who's going to take care of what funeral home do you want to use, what are your wishes, what do you want. If you do not meet with a funeral home, filling these forms out and having them accessible to your loved ones is the number one thing you can do for your loved ones. Okay? Obviously, it's better if you meet with a funeral home and get all of that put down at a funeral home as well, just so that when something happens, that funeral home's prepared and knows exactly what you want.
If we have something prepared with you, and we tell our family, and the time comes, and they cannot remember the name of the funeral home, if they call random funeral homes, can you give out the information like, yes, this person did pre-plan with us, or like if they couldn't remember who?
Right. So there's not like a universal directory for funeral homes, for instance. So if you make an arrangement with Cokes, and your family wasn't sure what to do, and they start at the top, they'd call Cokes, and Cokes would say, nope, she doesn't have pre-need here, but we can take care of her. No, I know she has pre-need somewhere. So then they call, used to be Heinzman on the Turnpike, Hockey Georgiana Funeral Home of Center County, right? And they say, nope. And then they call Doc and Boss, and I'm like, yep, we have it right here. Where is she?
Give out that
Take care of
information.
it. Yeah.
We wouldn't give out personal information. We would say, yes, the arrangements
Yes,
are
the
here.
arrangements are here.
Okay.
So I just wanted to touch base on something just real quick. On the gold ribbon one, the pamphlet that you have, so that's your directives. You can write that down. That doesn't make it legal if you're doing a living will or something. You need to get in touch with an attorney, or you have to go in front of a notary and have it notarized and witnessed. You can write it down, but if it's not legally done, then the courts could say, no, we don't have to abide by it. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there are places on there for notaries.
Yeah.
And Barbie and I are notaries, so even if you don't go with us, but you want to sit down with us and go over with us, we can help you fill that out and notarize it. So.
Very good. Thank you.
So it doesn't
I do
have
wanna
to be a lawyer, it can just be a notary?
For some of these, it can be a notary. For even a will, technically, it just needs to be notarized. Is it better to have your will registered with an attorney? Yes, because they can make sure all T's and all I's are done, right? As a notary, what your stuff says is none of my business. My only job as a notary is to say, yep, she is of sound mind. Nobody's breaking her arm to do this, and I'm watching her sign the paper. That is the only thing a notary's signature means, right? So actual legal content and things that are in there, it is best if you get it with an attorney. And if you do estate planning and those kinds of things, they have to be done through an attorney, estate plannings and trusts and, you know, however you guys go about that. So finding one that you really like and just doing all of your paperwork as a, I hate to say a one-stop shop, right? But as a one-stop deal, that would be the best way to go about that.
Make sure you do your homework on the attorneys. There's some out there that are good with elderly care, and then there's some out there that don't know doodly squat, but they'll lead you in a direction that really isn't best for you.
Right.
As long as you're paying them $150 an hour, they don't care.
Oh.
So make sure you do your homework on attorneys.
Are you allowed to give recommendations?
Recommendations.
For lawyers.
Who is it up here? Is it Goodall? I believe Goodall is the elderly attorney up here in State College. I like to use William Tressler in Bellefonte, and the other one I use is down in Lock Haven, so that's too far to go. But Bill Tressler is very good in Bellefonte. Miller is very good in Bellefonte. Miller, Kistler, and Campbell. They're very good they're pretty good with elderly things also.
Who's good in Lock Haven here?
Stuart Hall.
Okay. I was hoping for one that ends in Endhauser. Well, anyway, I do want to say for the record and for anyone who may be watching online, A Gift for My Loved Ones packets are actually available for download on the OCA website. So they are quite available there. So
If we get that, I can put that in the description of the video.
And there's what they look like.
Yep. Very good. Thank you very much. But yeah, these are all, so if you lose these, they're all available for download on OCA. You got to work to find them, but they're there.
Or Father can just send you the link. 'Cause he's
I
gonna get it
could
done.
definitely send you the link, you know.
I think I've been
So we
behind
can
it.
put it on the YouTube video.
Yeah, once I have it, I can put it in the description of the video,
Okay.
so anybody who watches can get it.
And then the other option, so pre-planning is just that, a plan, and then pre-funded means you pay for it in advance, okay? And there's so many different payment options, from I want to pay it all, here's the estimate for today, I want to pay it all, nope, I can't do that, I want to put $500 down and I want to pay $25 a month, or I want to pay $100 when I get $100, okay? There's so many different options out there. For us to go over all of those options today would be astronomical and overwhelming. But there are tailorable payment plans for that.
On that note, I keep jumping up, I'm sorry. So on that note, if you want to prepay and you want to pay it all, you're only allowed to put the count, or the state, no, it's a county. The county only allows you to put $12,500 in your pre-need account. So if you're trying to hide money, because when you go into a nursing home, she'll cover this, but when you go into a nursing home, they'll take everything you have. So if you're trying to hide money, you can only put $12,500 into a pre-need. Unless we come up and we show these numbers that you planned a $16,000 funeral, and that's what you want to put in, then that's a whole different story. But so there is certain guidelines if you want to prepay the full amount.
So benefits and downfalls. Okay, again, I'm not a good salesperson because I will tell you the bad on every side of the good. The good thing about pre-funding, it guarantees today's pricing with us. Okay, again, that's not every funeral home that offers that. That varies per funeral home. It
Is that common
guarantees our
practice, though?
services. I think so around here. It is. Some funeral homes will guarantee everything. Okay, they'll guarantee the cost of your casket. They'll guarantee everything. The way they do that is then whatever's in the account above and beyond with interest, they keep that to help offset the cost. The other way is they order your casket today. I'm not going to get into funeral homes. We're not here to praise or decline anybody. But there are some that they have warehouses. So you decide that you want an 18 gauge metal casket and you want it today for $2,500. So you pay them. Okay? They will order that casket today. But you don't pass away for 40 years. That has been sitting in their warehouse for 40 years, right? So then when something happens to you and you don't want to use that funeral home anymore, you come to me. They say, well, she already bought her casket through us. Okay, we have to accept a casket. If you decide you want to go to Amazon or Sam's Club or Costco sells caskets, and you want to purchase, right? You want to purchase your caskets from them, you're welcome to do that. We have to legally accept that casket. We do not need to guarantee the condition in which it arrives, right? We've seen it come in with makeup on the inside. We've seen them come in with dings and scratches. If you don't purchase it through us, we can't guarantee it through us, right? But I've had caskets arrive to me and the handles are rusted and there's nasty all over the outside, and we try to clean it up the best we can, and then the families get upset with us, and it's like, I can't do anything about that because it didn't come from us. We do not guarantee the cost of the casket. We include it in the estimate so that the money is there and building interest to help cover whatever inflation cost happens on that casket. But we don't have storage space. We don't have an airlocked, temperature controlled facility in order to do that. So we won't purchase your casket now. We wait until the time of need, right?
Okay.
And caskets are something that if you decide you want a solid oak casket, and it does with the price the way wood has, right? Wood has almost tripled in price over the last 2 years. So that interest rate has not been enough to cover. And your husband comes in and says, listen, I know she wants oak. I want to put her in as beautiful of an oak colored casket that we can, but can we find one that's a little more within the frame of what we put aside? Sure. Okay. What they can't change is if you want to have a viewing, we're giving you a viewing. Okay. So those are some of the things they can do. The benefits of doing that is also alleviating that burden, a financial burden on your loved ones, because you have peace of mind knowing that it is taken care of. Medicaid spend downs, which we'll go over later. And being able to protect assets is what that biggest part of that is. The downfall is that means you're taking money out of your account today. Okay, it goes into an irrevocable account, which means without a death certificate, these funds will never get paid. The death certificate and funeral expenses is what these funds are for. Okay, so you can't come to me 6 months from now and say, oh my gosh, we just gave you $12,000 and now we don't have food on our table. We need that money back. It's locked in. There's nothing we can do about that. Okay, so that's a downfall of getting rid of some of those funds out of your.
What if you like move out of state or something? It's movable to another funeral home, no matter where you
Anywhere in the
go?
world.
Okay.
So explain how that works, just.
So we have your arrangements and you retire and go to Florida. And you want to be taken care of in Florida. So what would happen is your family would set things up with Florida and you go to J2 Funeral Home. J2 Funeral Home then calls us and says, hey, we have Mrs. Smith down here. She had pre-arrangements with you. Great, we'll get you everything you need. And then we send everything directly to that funeral home, and then they make the claim against the company in which the funds are in.
The funds are not transferred though until you pass. So
Right.
The funds stay in the accounts that we have set up for you.
Right. So they get paid to the funeral home that takes care of you. But you can't be like, oh, here, give me this certificate that I paid and transfer it from funeral home to funeral home to funeral home to funeral home. It doesn't work that way. Okay. And again, payment options, paying everything in full, the various payments depending on your age. I'm going to tell you, once you hit 90, paying anything other than full estimate is difficult to do. Okay. But we put the pre-funding in like life insurance. It's classified as a life insurance. I hate that it's classified as that. Because it makes you think that it behaves like a traditional life insurance. It does not. It's an irrevocable life insurance. And they're gaining, I think, like 1.5 or 2.5% right now. Anyway, different programs have different payment schedules. And I hear all the time, I already have life insurance. Why do I want to prepay? I have life insurance because that's how I want to pay for my funeral. That's great. Problem is what happens if you go into a nursing home? If you go into a nursing home, and I'll go over this in another slide, it explains it a little better, but if you go into a nursing home, they can make you cash out your life insurance before Medicaid will ever step in to assist you. Okay, so then your $10,000 funeral backup plan has a cash-in value of $3,800, They take that $3,800 for center care nursing home, and you're left with nothing, and then you have no backup for your funeral. Okay? So by now, we've overloaded you guys with a bunch of information, and you're thinking, hurry up, we're hungry, right? I don't need this. I'm on assistance. The county will cover my costs. I'm a veteran. Uncle Sam owes it to me. Well, the truth is, Social Security gives your dependents $225 as a one-time payment, but they have to be a qualified dependent. Qualified dependent is someone under the age of 18 or a spouse. So if your spouse has already passed, you would have gotten that for your spouse, but when you pass, if you do not have children that are under the age of 18, there is no one-time death benefit of $255 by Social Security. Okay, go ahead.
Is that like, I mean, that's like a pathetically low number.
It's been that same number for years.
I was gonna say, is that one of those things that was like set in like 1976 and like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
got
it's
it,
been
yeah.
around forever.
And people are under the I don't mean to interrupt you. People are under the misconception that Social Security, if I'm on Social Security will pay for your funeral. It will not. There's no programs out there that will pay for your burial. People say, well, and do you have this about the...
Yeah.
Okay, I'll shut up.
So if you're a veteran, Center County VA, now this is county specific, right? Clinton County is 75, Center is 100. I'd have to look into it. Wherever you live is the county that takes care of the VA. That is the VA that we would apply to, not where you're buried, but where you currently live. Center County pays $100 towards your burial expenses and $100 towards either dating a headstone that's already in place or the installation, $100 towards the installation of a military stone, okay? That is only if your time served qualifies you. It cannot be during peacetime. It has to be seen as one of the war times. Even if you were stateside and you were not actively in combat, it still has to be serviced during wartime and what they see as official wartime.
Wow.
Your spouses will get less, okay? So if in the state of Pennsylvania, they still feel the husband should take care of everything for the wife and the estate should take care of everything for the husband, right? So if the husband is the one that served and he passes away first, then the wife could also be entitled to $100 only towards her burial. If, however, the husband is the service member and the wife passes first, she's entitled to nothing. Okay? That being said, they do get free death certificates no matter when you serve, as long as we have your military discharge. You and your spouse get free death certificates. During COVID, they limited that to 10. They have since released that limit again, so it doesn't matter if we need 15 or 20. And death certificates are $20 each right now by the state. So say you have no dependents, no next of kin, you're on assistance, okay? Or your family just says, no, I'm not taking care of it. The county can take on your burial. Here's what happens. It goes to a county coroner. You are cremated. You are disposed of in an undisclosed location. Your family does not get your remains. Your family gets nothing. And everything you own gets turned over to the county. Everything. Your home, life insurance, bank accounts. It does not matter what it is. Your family is entitled to nothing. They do not even get a death certificate. Okay? So is it an option? Sure. We try to do everything we can to make sure that is not the option that your family has to choose.
That's horrendous. Is that specific to Center County or is that just like
Everywhere.
Pennsylvania?
That's everywhere. That's everywhere.
It doesn't matter what state either.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, so if you have a life insurance policy and your son is the beneficiary and they give you up to the county, he's not the beneficiary. The county
Wow.
gets everything.
Wow.
And I had a family that tried that and they said, we don't want to do it, turn it over to let the state pay for him, let the state pay for it. So we had the coroner call and say, okay, we have access to his Social Security number, we will shut his bank account down. And they said, well, you can't do that. You know, that's our money, that's our inheritance. Then you need to pay to have him, you know, to get things taken care of.
Wow.
So the family changed their mind, but it was they wanted their cake and eat it too, you know.
Yeah, right.
So Medicaid spend downs in nursing homes. Okay, so this is a huge, huge, huge reason for pre-arranging and pre-funding. What can they take? They can take anything and everything, basically, and before Medicaid will kick in. Okay, now if you're self-pay and you're paying Center Care $14,000 a month for your care,
And
out
that's
of
not
your
an
own pocket.
astronomical figure, that's pretty
No,
close to
that's
what it is.
pretty accurate. And you're paying that every month out of your own pocket. Obviously, they're not going to touch your life insurance. They're not going to touch your home. But if you need to go on Medicaid to help pay for that, you have to do a Medicaid spend down. You and your spouse are only allowed to have a certain amount of dollars, and I don't know that number. It's a very low.
I want to say
not
when
lucky.
my grandfather was on it, it was 2,000.
It's still 2,000. Well, unless you make a certain, like if you're on Social Security and make below a certain amount, you get to keep an extra 6,000.
Yeah, which is nominal to live on, right? I mean, that's like
Yeah,
nothing.
Yeah.
It's like the basic Social Security with no other income.
Yeah. So they can make you cash in your life insurance. So here's the 3 terms that are most important with life insurance. The owner. Okay? The owner is the policy holder. They make all the decisions about that policy. It is legally their asset. Then you have the insured. That is the person that when that person dies, the money is for. Okay? And then you have the beneficiary, which is who gets paid the money when that person dies, the insured person dies. If you are the owner of your own policy, that is your asset. They can make you cash that in for cash value and turn it over to them. Right? So if you ever go into a nursing home and you have life insurance, the first things you need to do is you need to change the owner of that policy. Right? You can make it a funeral home. You can make it your children. You can make it your spouse. Whoever you make it to be, you have to trust them 100% because they can cash it in. They can do whatever they want with it once they're classified as the owner. They can change the beneficiaries. They can do whatever they want, right? So you really need to make sure you trust who you make an owner of that policy. Okay.
I'm gonna guess that probably sometimes people try to put their children on as co-owners, thinking that's gonna get them around this.
Right.
But it wouldn't,
It will
right?
not.
I
As long
know
as
my
they're
grandmother
able-
tried something like that, not with life insurance, but with something else. It's like, Grandma, you didn't solve that problem because you're still an owner on, I think it was her house.
Yes.
You know.
Properties are like that.
Yeah.
And they can go back 5 to 7 years. So if you put your house in your kids' name, and 4 years later, you go into a nursing home. That nursing home can come back and say, we want half or a portion of the value of that house because you did that knowing that in 4 years you were going to get sick enough to go into a home. Right? So they see a 5 to 7 year window as a cushion.
And Medicaid allows them to do that.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Yep.
So let me give you an example of something that happened to a family in Snowshoe. The gentleman had no children, was never married. He turned his house over to his nephew. 15 years ago, whatever it was, he turned the house over to the nephew with the understanding that the nephew could live, the uncle could live in the house. The uncle would pay all repairs, pay the taxes and everything on the house. But when he dies, it goes to the nephew. That was great. The gentleman went into Centercrest, into Belfont to Centercrest. They went back 7 years and checked the checking account of the gentleman that went into the nursing home. If he wrote a check out for taxes, the nephew had to give that money back to the nursing home for those taxes. And if he paid cash, there was no record of it, so that was fine. If he paid the light bill with a check, the nephew had to give the money back to the nursing home. The nephew actually lost out on the whole thing, but it makes them sound like they're pricks, but they're really not. That's the guidelines that they have. And
Right.
so you just have to be careful. And if you sign your house over to your kids, if you're thinking of doing that, make sure you trust your kids, because kids will see that the house is in their name, then they'll go borrow against it, or they'll sell it out from underneath you, and you can't stop them. So make sure again, talk to an attorney. They will help you with this stuff.
Success story on that. My grandfather signed his house over to my father in 1995, and ended up going into a nursing home probably about 5 years ago, and they were not able to go anywhere near the house.
Right. Because the time had passed.
So much time had passed that they were outside of their window.
Yep.
But yeah, that can be done. That can be successfully.
Yes, oh yes, it can.
And an attorney, an estate attorney, helps do that. They can look at all of your assets and your home and this and that, and your financials, and they can say, okay, the best thing to do at this point is for estate planning, or let's put your house in a trust, right? And there's certain, and I'm not an attorney, so I don't understand trust. I wouldn't even pretend to. But I have a lot of families that's what they do. They put their homes into trusts or their businesses. They're self-employed. They have very successful businesses. They put things into trusts. And that helps protect assets. I do not know exactly how, and I don't know these details. An attorney will definitely help you with that. But how does Medicaid affect your pre-funded funeral? They cannot touch it. They're not entitled to any part of it. Which is why some people come in and their funeral bill, the estimate is $10,600. And they say, you know what? I have extra money. I'm going to protect this. And they put $12,500 into that account. And that protects some of their assets. We have people, they want a cremation, and their cremation cost is $5,000. And they say, I want to put $10,000 in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes Medicaid spend downs, they'll come in and they'll say, do you have pre-arrangements? No, I do not. You need to meet with a funeral home. You need to do pre-arrangements. You need to get rid of $11,000, right? They'll tell you that. Some of the nursing homes, Zeta at Center Care is very good at telling families that. This is what we have to get you down to, right? And then you call a funeral home and you make that arrangement, okay? If you're doing it for Medicaid spend downs. If you already have your funerals pre-arranged, and that's just a thought is, okay, we're pretty set, let's just pay the max to get it out there, and at least we know whatever comes back goes back to your children. If your spouse is already gone, goes back to your children inheritance tax free. Life insurance is inheritance tax free. Okay.
So with the Medicaid thing, if you go into a funeral home, or not a funeral home, into a nursing home, and you're paying for it out of your own pocket, but then 7 years down the line, you no longer have the money for it, and it goes to Medicaid.
Right.
If it's past that 7-year mark, can they go after it? Or if it all happened before that 7-year mark, is it not something they can take?
It's a 5 to 7 year, no matter where you live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter if you're already in a nursing home or if you're at home. It's
Okay.
a 5 to 7 year period back is what they can go to take things such as your home and
Okay.
things like that, right? For Medicaid spend downs, if you're in a home for 7 years and you've run out, now you need Medicaid. Before Medicaid will kick in, they'll make you cash out your life insurance policies. They'll
Right.
make you sell your car. They'll make you, right?
Right.
They'll do all these things that you need to do in order for Medicaid to say, okay, you finally have less than $2,000 or $6,000 buffer
Mm-hmm.
in all liquidated assets. We're talking investments. I've had them make people cash in their 401s. They've had to cash in stocks. They've had to cash in, right? So all of your liquidatable assets have to be under a certain threshold before Medicaid will kick in. So everything you work so hard for to be able to give your children something, they can come and take that.
What is the threshold? What's the threshold?
Honestly, I don't. She said it was like $2,000 unless you're on Social Security, and then they might give you $6,000.
Yeah,
But it's nominal. I can tell you that.
it was $2,000 for my grandfather. You know, so I mean, yeah, for Medicaid to pay for your skilled care, you know, is I mean, you pretty much have to have nothing at that point, nothing in your name.
And there is a
As I
way.
understand it.
Dad will describe this better than what I can, but say we're married, right? And I go into the nursing home. They can't kick you out of the house.
You know.
Okay.
What they will do is they will, not the.
No, that's what I don't.
What they will do is they will put a lien against the house for 50% of the house, because you two are married, and so it's jointly owned. You can live there as long as, you know, you want to live there. And if you want to pay off her debt of the nursing home, you may do that, and then that's less of a lien. But you pass away, and there's a $50,000 lien for Centercrest, and your kids want to sell the house, they have to pay Centercare. Your son inherited the house, he has to pay Centercare before he gets a clean deed. And I don't think once you go into a home, if you sell that house, Centercare wants to know what you did with all that money. So kind of what you were thinking. They want to know where all the money went. And if you gave it to your kids, I've also seen it where you sell your house and you gave the money to the kids have to come back up and give that back if it's within a 5 to 7 year period.
Because you can gift a child $10,000 cash a year.
Until
But
you
if
win to a
they see
nursing home.
that, but if they see that, they can say, oh wait, over the last 5 years, you gave each of your children $50,000. We want that back. And then your kids are responsible to turn around and get that back to them. Right? So the best thing in those situations is estate attorneys do estate planning, trust planning, above all else, and then, you know, funeral planning as well, just to help cover some of that. Do you guys have, oh, one other thing, just because we're here. I know you guys like to do things within 3 days, and I know Father asked if that would ever be an issue. For us, as a funeral home, just to let you guys know, we do not get caskets on Sundays, right? Our delivery service doesn't work on a Sunday for caskets. So what that means is something happened to you, we would do our absolute best to honor your religion. I cannot stand here in full faith and say I guarantee you it will be in 3 days, because it depends. It depends on your casket.
Nor, I mean, at this point,
You know.
like, obviously, like, for 3 days is sort of an ideal, but, I mean, at this point, I don't think I have yet had a funeral here that's been within 3 days.
It's because you've not been working with the right funeral
Oh,
home.
stop it.
Well, that may be true, but I say that, I mean, in part, I mean, that's actually much more like, you know, oh, you know, my family are living in Connecticut.
Yeah,
My
the
family are
issue
living
of people
in-
living
Everybody
away.
lives away nowadays.
Yeah.
They
You know,
don't
we
stay
have,
where they are.
I say we, but it's me, because I have more room in Snowshoe than she has in Center Hall. I have 3 caskets on the floor, so if something would come up and you guys say, I definitely need within the 3 day, as long
We
as
need it
you,
tomorrow.
as long as you'll take one of the 3 caskets I have, then, you know, we're good to go.
I think, you know, I think too, you know, you talk about like social expectations. You know, if we go back 300 years, 400 years, whatever, there's no, like, okay, my child is living in Massachusetts.
Right.
There's no, A, I'm not going to be able to get word to them. B, you know, they're simply going to miss their mother's funeral
Right.
or whatever. And that's understood. But we definitely have a level of, you know, we're living in a world with jet engines and that kind of thing. And, you know, oh, can we delay this for a couple of days in order to allow, you know, children or grandchildren or other loved ones, you know. And I would just say, you know, pastorally speaking, I absolutely think that there are reasons to do that. You know, to deliberately be embalmed and, you know, have it a week out or something like that. You know, because we do have that option for your relatives in California who want to come to come. You know, again, those are all kind of things to juggle. And obviously, and as they said, you know, the embalming question, we don't really at this point have any other option, you know, to do an open casket funeral in Pennsylvania. So if you want that, if you want it different, you know, you got to be like Father John and go to Texas. You know,
Or Alaska.
where they,
Alaska.
yeah, well,
I
you know,
would not
my-
want to see it.
Friends, if we bought a casket, they use it as a coffee table. Do you? Well, it was wooden, it was homemade, but it was sanctioned according to our church. You know.
Right.
Do you expect it? Would you come in and say, you know, this is good for this or that? Where it can be, you know, planted or can it be sealed or not? They're probably not sealable, right?
They're not
Right,
sealable.
they're
If
not
they're wood,
sealable.
they're not going to be sealable.
Yeah. So we don't, for instance, and I go back to the Amish just because
You
They're
were-
about as
it was
rudimentary as it
Coke that
comes.
did the one that had a sort of independently made, who did a funeral here that had an independently made casket, like
Oh,
with like
okay.
a removable lid and that kind of thing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what the gentleman that made it, like, you know, like what kind of certification or
exactly.
whatever.
So we would accept it. We cannot legally decline it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So the Amish make their own, right? They all make their own. and they're arthropodal shaped, so it's an actual coffin, not a casket. And the lid comes off, and we take them to their home, and they're laid out in a private room, and they have a 24 to 72 hour wake, and then they do burials on certain days. Okay, so in that instance, do we inspect their caskets? No, we do not. We take them to their home, we lay them out, but they are embalmed. That's where our inspection would need to come in. If you say, I'm not being embalmed, period, then we'd say, okay, we're going to put you in a sealed casket. Here are your options. And, we want to do this as fast as we can.
And that-
Legally, we have to
and
have
that
you
is-
in the ground within 10 days.
And that is Pennsylvania law too, so if not embalmed, then sealed casket,
Yes.
sealed metal casket.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and that's just because of the,
And if you want to make your own
Biohazard
casket, you're welcome. If you had someone that wanted to make the casket, it just has to be able to fit into the vault. So we say the specifications are no longer than 7 feet. I think they're 33 inches wide, outside dimensions, and they can only be so high. That would be a requirement we'd have to look at just to make sure they're going to fit in the vault.
Cemetery requirement. Yeah. Well, we got one man in the parish that's got experience. So our previous rector, Father John, as I mentioned, was buried in Texas, and actually he had his coffin made here by one of our parishioners before he left. So
nice.
That went with him to Texas.
I'm sure the person that's making them, they know the dimensions. They know what they're doing. So
Well,
But that being said, I just had a, it's called Sun Valley Bronze. They do very high-end bronze things in Sun Valley, Idaho. I actually had the owner of that company call me. They wanted dimensions of urns because they wanted to make an urn for the owner's wife that had passed, right? So if anybody ever wants to make their own, I've had other people that said, hey, I'm making my own. This is what I want. I've sent them dimensions. Here's the dimensions you would want to look at. And at any funeral home that is pleasant and worth anything, they'll do that for anybody, They'll be able to guide in, yeah.
Just by the way, the embalming law, how far back does that go?
Honestly, honey, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know.
I've been Orthodox almost 20 years, and I've kissed and touched a lot of bodies in between. Never known whether the body was embalmed or not.
I can tell you that I worked at a Jewish store in Belfont back in the 80s, so that's been 30 years, or 40 years, or whatever. And they did not embalm then, but they had to be buried within 24 hours.
24 hours.
Yeah, they were 24 hours.
They were 24 hours, yeah.
So I can tell you when he graduated in 05. When he graduated mortuary school in 05, it was required to embalm for public viewings then. Okay, but I truly don't know.
How did it generally work with organ donation? Like, how long does that take before they can release the body to you, or is it circumstantial depending on the organ?
It is very circumstantial.
Okay.
And it depends on what you're donating. Okay, so there is, and I don't want to get graphic, but I'm going to get graphic here for a minute. There is organ donation and there is tissue donation, 2 separate things. Okay, so if you have on your license that you're an organ donor, the hospital's going to see that. Depending on the manner in which you die, if they take organ, heart, liver, lung, kidney, they keep you on a machine until they're ready. The term is harvest. Until they're ready to harvest.
They pronounce you deceased today, but they might not harvest your organs for 3 days.
Right.
And,
They keep you on that until they find a recipient.
So can the funeral start prepping, or does the funeral
No,
cancel
we can't do a
anything
thing until
until
we
you
get you
are?
back.
Okay. that's
Now,
good to know.
I would call. Are you? I don't know if you guys are. Are you guys? Are you,
Yes.
okay. Okay. I hate to assume
Yes.
anything anymore. So something happens to you, and you're an organ donor. They're going to call him and say, okay, can we take heart? Can we take lungs? Can we take kidney? Can we take liver? Can we take eyes? Can we take bone, which is all long bone from shoulder to wrist, hip to toes? Can we take skin, which is shoulder to shoulder, butt, and about that thick?
I can really take all of it.
They take it all.
And when you come back to us, I will tell you, for embalming and viewing purposes, full skin and bone donation, it really does wreak havoc
body.
So
on
like
the body.
stick with the organ.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, they can, so they'll ask you, right?
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
die horrifically in a car accident or you have a heart attack at home, they're not gonna be able to take your organs, right? Because they weren't able to keep you and your organs alive on a
Alive.
machine.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you don't
So-
die at a hospital, then it doesn't matter anyway.
Kind of.
Right.
Okay.
So at that point, but they'll still call and say, hey, we saw she was an organ donor, can we take her eyes? Absolutely, right? Take the eyes.
So if you
Can
die
we take
at
the
home,
bone?
if
That's
you
up to
die
you.
at home and they say, yeah, you can have her eyes, then they've got to transport you from home to the hospital, and then we pick you up at the hospital.
And usually that can take 24 to 72 hours before your body is released for us to even be able to pick you up to start the embalming process in order to get you turned around for a viewing.
And we're making it sound like body donations, organ donations is a bad thing. It's really not. It is a
Right.
good thing. I mean, it saves a lot of lives. It just,
You have to be aware of everything.
yeah,
that
because of the
comes.
time
Yeah.
restraints, sometimes it's
So it can take a while.
And again, these are issues that 300-400 years ago,
we
it was
didn't
not an
have.
issue.
Yeah.
It's simply not an issue.
This is a very different, like, category question, going all the way back to, like, assets and protecting assets by, like, prepaying for your funeral with a funeral home.
Right.
It's like you were saying that, like, okay, you need to pay a little more so that you avoid Medicare spend down situations, like you need to get more assets protected. Like, what happens in a situation where, like, let's say you gave the example of, like, you know, funeral's gonna cost like $10,600 today, but I'm gonna go ahead and pay like $12,300.
Right.
Like, God forbid, but what happens if you're like on your way home, die in a horrific car accident, your funeral needs to happen like within that next week? Presumably the price wouldn't have gone up $1,400, right?
Right.
So like, does that go back to your family or does the funeral home belong to
That we turn it back over to the family.
Gotcha.
Whatever.
There are
not
some
used,
funeral homes that will keep that. That is something very specific that you need to ask whatever funeral home is if the remaining funds, what do you do with those remaining funds? Okay, we as a funeral home return that back to your loved ones. With us, if you were to give me a check today and you die 3 days from now, okay, the company we use would honor that check and turn around and pay it back out again. Okay. Now, if you paid me a check today and you passed in a car accident going home, that's null and void, right? Your spouse or your kids or somebody would have to
Yeah,
give
we
that
just
money to
basically,
us.
we wouldn't cash the check and we would
Right.
give it back to your spouse and say, this is what we were doing. So.
Okay.
Can you elaborate on the green cemetery? I wasn't sure I understood. It means it doesn't need a vault or could have a vault?
Right, so Pax Tang Cemetery, and the only reason I know this, I just had a lady that did pre-arrangements, that she wanted to look into this, so I did a bunch of research for her. And she actually is going to be buried at Pax Tang Cemetery. It's in Harrisburg. So what it is when you go to their cemetery, they have a traditional cemetery, right, and that has vaults. Then they have their green cemetery, which is on the side of a mountain hill. There is pathways through the trees, and I'm going to use this as an example, this plot here. So if you walk up and you say, okay, this is the plot I want to buy, right? They say, okay, this plot is X amount of dollars. Your options are cremation, no vault or no urn. Cremation, put directly in the ground, or you can be buried. For their burials, you are not allowed to be embalmed. You are not allowed to be in any kind of external enclosure. You get wrapped in a shroud that you purchase either through us or that cemetery actually has burial shrouds and things like that. Then they offer wicker and bamboo baskets, which is just that. It's an Arthur Caudle shape, so it's an old traditional coffin style shape, and it biodegrades. They have trays, and it's just a bamboo or wicker tray or willow. I think they offer willow ones. It's just a tray, and then your wrapped, shrouded body lays inside there. We take it up on a cart. Okay, we're not allowed to drive up there. You take it up on a hand cart.
Sorry.
You're then carried and lowered down into the ground, and then they take all the dirt and just dump it directly on top of you. You are not allowed a headstone. You purchase a boulder, a mountain stone, depending on the size that you want, and they put it raw with your name engraved on it. Your family's not allowed to put flowers on there. You're only allowed to choose indigenous plants that they plant for you. and they give you a list, and then you choose like, okay, so this is indigenous to this area. I want this kind of shrub, this kind of tree, and this kind of flower, and you pay for that, and then that's what gets put on your
So
on your
most of
plot.
that is specific to that cemetery.
That is very specific to
But
that
it's
cemetery.
not like for regulation, you want to have a green cemetery.
So the regulation for a green cemetery is absolutely no chemicals, no embalmings. Everything has to be biodegradable for it to be classified as green. Everything has to return to earth. So you wouldn't be able to have vaults at a green cemetery. You'll never find a vault at a green cemetery. You'll never find a casket at a green cemetery unless they approve, like, and I keep going back to the Jewish caskets, but because they're all wood, they may approve something like that. But traditionally it's not. Traditionally it's something very soft-sided, no structure.
Okay, I like a lot of that except for the hippie element. All right. I like a lot of what I was hearing.
I
there.
think it's great. I think it's a great thing, but I think the one plot with the stone, just the
No,
cemetery
sure.
stuff,
Is it-
not funeral stuff, just the
Not the
cemetery
vault,
stuff
for
alone was
sure,
almost
but like-
$17,000 for one person.
I know
So
mechanics.
who
but it doesn't
enforces
do
all
vaults.
that? Is that the coroner that makes sure people are doing things that way, or?
Probably the owners of the cemetery.
Yeah, the
Or
cemeteries
cemetery-
don't go out.
cemeteries.
If you try to do a person that's involved and wrap them in a shroud, the cemetery official sees that. Oh, no. Then
And
we
for
get
green
into
burials,
trouble.
like
We
we
take you to
take
the other
you,
side.
but the cemetery officials are always present.
Okay.
Right, so the rule and law of a funeral director, our job, is to get you from the point of death to the point of final disposition, which is either burial or cremation. Okay. Now, are there new things that are coming in that are not accepted in Pennsylvania yet? Yes. There is aquamation, which is cremation by water. They put you in a basic solution, and it kind of acts like a autoclave almost, right? So it adds a bunch of pressure, and there's an agitator at the right, and then you dissolve into
Like
the
a
water.
washing machine.
Yeah, like a washing machine. And then you dissolve into the water. All of that is then dispensed of, and what you have left is the same skeletal bone that you do after a burning cremation, a fire, cremation by fire, right? And then you treat those remains in the same way. The other new one that just got approved in New York, but they're still having issues with it, is they put you in a pod. What's it called? When you
Human composting?
Thank you. It's composting. And that is, you get put in, there's sawdust,
It's natural.
and then your body, and then a layer of microbe-infused dirt, and then sawdust again, and you're put in a container for 30 days. They take you out, take your bones out, pulverize them, put them back in for another 30 days, and then you have your compost pile. And then your family takes that. Now how, I don't know. Right?
Plant vegetables in it. I don't know.
Right? So the problem they're having with that is, like Pennsylvania, we legally have to have you to your final disposition in 10 days. Right? So you have to be cremated or buried within 10 days unless we write to the board for some weird reason. New York has that same law. It's a certain time frame, but it takes 60 days for you to officially be composted, right? So even though they approve the composting, legally they haven't approved that disposition time frame yet. So there's still a battle going on there.
Just one more off the wall question on that.
Yeah.
So, so like if you're going to be very traditional about like super traditional Orthodox burial, right? And this is still practiced in parts of Greece, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You've got sort of stage one where you bury a person in some way, shape, or form. It could be like upright tomb. It could be, like under the ground, whatever. Stage two is, okay, this person, their flesh all gone, whatever. Now we scoop them up and put them into a little ossuary, right? Like a little bone box, right?
Right.
What, like 1 or 2 years later or something, right?
Yeah.
Or in like a
or
charnel
three.
house.
But at this point, I'm going to assume that is like way out of bounds in terms of Pennsylvania
I've
law.
never heard of it around
Yeah,
here.
so in
Never
order
even-
for that to happen, I would almost bet my license it would require a disinterment paperwork and permit, which
Yeah.
has to be acquired through the court system. That's not something that anybody can just get. You would have to have a disinterment approval, explain why you're doing it,
Mhm.
how the process then works, and then a reinterment in that ossuary. or whatever it
Ossuary,
was.
yeah.
Ossuary, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do you have to pulverize the bones after you cremate?
Oh,
Or
yes.
You can't just give it back in a.
Why would you want them back?
Oh, I was just thinking it was interesting that it's just an extra step, but I just didn't know why you
No.
take the
So
extra
that-
step
that
to
is
pulverize
That is a
them.
step that people, because when you are cremated, your bones are still intact. You are not ash. You are
Right.
not
Right.
anything like that, right? So your bone structure is still there. It's very fragile, but it is still there. So all of that has to be finished by 1 or 2 pulverizing processes in order to get it small enough for them to be classified and put you in an urn that's 320 cubic
cremains.
inches
Yeah.
as cremated.
Those just, you
Yes.
take the bones apart and just put
Yes.
them in a box.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
So-
Well, this was
Thank you.
probably your most graphic of these presentations you've ever
We
given.
got into some gruesome things, sure, but it was good. Very information, very
Yeah.
informative.
Well, we want to thank you very much for being with us and for providing us with this very useful information.
And as I
Thanks
told
for
you
having us.
when we spoke on the phone, Barbie and I are here. We're willing to work with everyone. Every case is a different case. Every family situation is a different situation. But Barbie and I are here, and we'll do whatever we can to help you guys at that time. So.
And I promise, if we ever have services, we will absolutely reach out to you to make sure it's okay.
This
Turn
is
off that YouTube
okay,
thing.
yeah, turn off the YouTube. Actually, don't. This is not to be named funeral home in the
No,
area
no.
here who
No.
was planning services in our church without ever having contacted me about. So like I actually heard of it the day of, like the not the day of the funeral, but the day of the like I had heard of it tangentially through the family. They'd never called me and said, "You're
We're gonna
bringing."
show up with a body.
Yeah, yeah.
They
So-
asked me and I told them it was okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you.